It's the leader. He's the wizard. He's forcing the mouth open.
Well, stop him. Kill him or something.
My dagger is gone. You kill him.
Not me. It's bad luck to kill a wizard.
Wait. There's a better way to take care of a wizard.
Hello, fellow initiates. Today is a little different. We're a little more serious. I was talking with Chadster Jr., if you're familiar, and just kind of getting up to speed on what's been happening with the Four Horsemen. That's been around a while. It's got some popularity. But during the discussions, we were talking about some of the stuff that Ken Meyer had done for them and some of the projects they worked on together. So we were able to get Ken Meyer Jr. on here and have a pretty nice, good interview with him. Some fun stories. So I hope you guys enjoy this.
At the global meeting of gem collectors, he was hired for security. He failed so badly as the crowd director. Instead he partied with the devil sector. Four arms are better than two when doing shots with the crew. Gripping a bottle of Jack Daniels in one hand, had a bong in the other hand. He was still playing drums in the band. This night in Hong Kong, the moonshine was strong. The ladies weren't wrong. This party animal was where we belong. Hit the gong, pass the bong, let's see that thong. Let's see that thong. Stone-throwing devils did their best to steal some jewels during this mess. But the guardian beast is not be fucked with it, especially after he just finished a second fifth. His four fists of fury hit so hard, their bones and bodies littered the yard. Guardian beast. Stone-throwing devils did their best to steal some jewels during this mess. But the guardian beast is not be fucked with, especially after he just finished a second fifth. His four fists of fury hit so hard, their bones and bodies littered the yard. Guardian beast. Guardian beast.
It was kind of the joke brought up that Eric said, like, everyone's going to think this is AI, so we need to somehow prove to people, because I'm always goofing around with something. And
It was
but
AI.
that,
Changed my face a lot.
yeah, we have like the AI audio. We had Jism Jin on here the other night interrupting the whole time. It was pretty funny. So
I saw that one.
yeah, then the last one had all the movie Magic the Gathering, the movie, and the promos, and then all the stuff they were selling, and it was kind of funny. So, but anyhow, yeah, it's kind of different to have real guests and a real agenda. But I think we could pull this off too.
Should we start with some intros?
Sure. The podcast crew knows Jason and I. We're the usuals on here. So, and then we've got two new unique guests for us today. Go ahead, Chad. You can introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chad. I'm the founder of the Four Horsemen Oldschool Magic the Gathering Players Group. And we put the podcast together today, invited Ken, and thanks for coming on with us. The the kind of the context here is Ken's had a lot to do with some of the prizes that we put together for the group. So we're going to talk about that, and I'm glad to be on.
My name's Phil Stone, and I'm a really terrible artist, but somehow I got work. I don't know what happened. I must have slept with the right person. Who knows? Actually, my name's Ken. That's right. I just remembered that. My name's Ken Meyer, and I did the artwork behind two of these guys, and one guy was so inept he couldn't get it behind him. So now I have actual artwork behind me.
Impressive, yeah. I love Mystic Remora. I mean, that thing actually looks like a real fish. I didn't realize that until some point.
I hope so, because that's what I intended.
Yeah, like in the last couple of years, I actually saw that thing, and I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't just a weird, goofy art. That was a real, yeah. Most of my world knowledge comes from Magic in some way or another. So my wife's like, you know the weirdest things, and I never tell her why. I only know the weirdest things because they're probably a Magic card somewhere in the last 35 years or whatever it's been. Well, Chad, you actually have a nice little presentation put together. Let's go ahead and you kind of walk us through what you've been doing. I kind of reached out to you because I was just curious. I have not had much time lately. I was playing a lot of the Four Horsemen and then kind of just ran out of time. Honestly, I have not done any webcam stuff. So I was like, man, these guys are still going strong. I need to get up to speed. So that's what got us talking, and got into all this cool art that you guys have generated and stuff. And walk us through some of this.
All right, thanks, Brian. Well, so just a quick blurb on the Four Horsemen, and we'll get into some of the art that Ken's done for us. So for anyone in the Old School Magic online, webcam type community, the Four Horsemen Old School Magic Players Group started in about 3 years ago in July of 2022. And we really kind of set out to try to innovate and do something different in the old school Magic space. I got back into old school Magic like a lot of folks did during COVID, and drug out my cards. I'm fortunate that other than a few painful trades that I traded away, which I'll never forget, knowing now what's going on with these old school Magic cards, I'm fortunate I have most of my childhood collection, which I threw in a closet and kind of forgot about and drug it out during COVID when my wife and I were trapped at home along with everybody else. And that's kind of what got me back into Magic, and played a little while. And I never had any of the real power cards in terms of like Moxes and Lotus and stuff, but I did have a collector's edition set that I won as a tournament prize back in the day. And you couldn't play with those cards. So I remember chunking the box into my closet as a kid and kind of being mad that I won this useless set of cards I couldn't play with. Unfortunately, I kept that. It's with my collection, and so I kind of got back into the old school scene through just looking on YouTube, and found Discord and the Facebook groups, and ultimately I saw that there was kind of a unique opportunity to kind of create our own format and do something different for people that maybe didn't have all the power cards, or maybe folks that were active in the 93, 94 timeframe and didn't get in on the Alpha, Beta, Unlimited stuff, but maybe got in, with Antiquities or Legends or the Darks and stuff like that. And so working with a guy named Nick Breyer, we basically kind of sparked this idea to do a old school Magic format focused on those first four expansions: Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and the Dark. And we're about 3.5 years into it now, and we're about to do our 20th tournament, and we've done an in-person event as well at SCG Con when Ken was here a couple years back, and we're going strong, and it's been a lot of fun. So when it comes to Ken and I connected, I think it was in 2022 as well, when we were sparking this idea for Four Horsemen, and we basically wanted to create a set of prizes to incentivize people to play, and also to have something unique and different to give out to the players. And so one of the great things about Ken is he's active at all of the Magic events. He's active on Facebook, social media, and super friendly, approachable, and incredibly easy to work with.
He nods his head. No, it's all facade. Uh-uh.
So that's kind of how this got started. I reached out to Ken over Facebook and told him about what we were doing, and we kind of went from there. And we can take a look at the art that Ken did for us. Ken, is there anything you wanna say about any of that?
No, because obviously it's sort of behind the scenes for me. It's your group, and I sort of came in a specific spot when you asked me to do what I ended up doing for you. So all the background stuff, and in fact, I never learned to play the game too. So there's an awful lot of stuff that I'm clueless about in Magic that I just get help from players and people like you. And so I think you covered your part great. You can ask me questions about me, and I'll be glad to answer.
Yeah. Well, why don't you give us some background, Ken? Some folks know a lot about you, others don't know a lot. You've got a really interesting history, how you became an artist, what got you into this kind of genre of art. I think that stuff would be really fascinating for the viewers.
Okay, well, get a sandwich. I like most kids, I started drawing when I was really young, and usually what makes someone an artist is they just stuck with it longer than other people. I really only believe talents, such as it is, makes up like 10% of what someone's achieved, and the rest of it's just work, practice, mistakes, perseverance, looking at other people's art, stuff like that. So when I was a kid, and still to some degree now, I was mainly a comic book fan, and that's what my aim was a comic book artist. So like through high school, I did various comic type of artwork. I got work published in the fanzines of the time, which was pretty important to me. And I do a blog each month on those old fanzines, and did some comic book work in like the late 80s and the 90s. And I had a lot of normal and some strange full-time art jobs along the way. Probably the weirdest one is I had a couple jobs in a row, different companies, as a civilian contractor working for the military. And this one job that I got, I was living in Vegas at the time, and all the other people also, we would all get on a plane wherever we lived and fly to this remote site in the Nevada desert near Tonopah.
Oh, wow. I've heard this. It's like its own private airline, right?
Yeah, it was like a 737, your standard, passenger jet.
Yeah.
And we would work 4 10-hour days. We lived in this pretty nice trailer, had really good food. They had intramural sports because, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere. And that was for the stealth fighter when it was still classified. So I did a bunch of artwork for that, and I had other kinds of jobs along the way. I worked at Sony for a while on EverQuest, and a lot of other advertising agencies, educational companies, et cetera. And in about 92, I don't know how I found out about it, but I started doing work in the role-playing game area, but it was for the role-playing game books. First, it was this company called Mayfair Games. It had this werewolf game called Lycanthrope. And then I started doing a lot of work for White Wolf Games, black and white interior work for their books. And then I think it was one of two things. Either Richard Thomas, who was an art director and artist, went over, started doing work for Magic, and introduced me to the art directorship to Jesper Meerfors at the time, remotely. Or it was a woman named Maria Carbato, who was an art director who also went to Magic to do some, I think, art direction work. So that's how I started, like 92-ish, doing work in Arabian Nights, and then Ice Age, and 1 or 2 or 3 cards after that. And it wasn't until, and one kind of funny thing, sort of like you were talking about your cards, thinking, why should I keep this crap? I had no clue, and I don't think anybody did, how much Magic was going to grow and become popular. So I sold like Guardian Beast for like $100 to somebody, that sort of thing. And hey, don't laugh. I'm not laughing.
No.
Um, So anyway, it wasn't until probably like 10 years later that I found out that there were events for this and started going to these events, and I do a lot now. And it's really kind of funny that this work I did more than 30 years ago is, paying my bills now,
Yeah.
mainly through commissions for like altars and going to all these various shows. Like I'm looking at my calendar, next Tuesday, I go to Denmark for one of these things. So it's really, I feel like even though I would have loved to do more cards and kept doing cards, I'm still really fortunate that I just happened to start when I did and have it continue for so long like it has.
Yeah. Wow. That's such a cool story. I had no idea you were working like in Area 51, basically doing top secret art. Did you end up getting like top secret clearance to have to be working on that program?
Well, it was a level below that. Below that, it was just secret clearance. There was a time in Vegas when I was driving down the street, and some policeman pulled me over. I can't remember what it was for, and he said, where do you work? I said, well, you're not going to like this, but I can't tell you because they told me. And I don't think I got a ticket. I can't remember what happened, but it was an interesting job. You can only really, most people I think can only do it for so long because you're away from where you live almost all week. You come back on a Friday, you have to get all your whatever you do at home stuff done in a couple days or a day if stuff's only open on weekdays, and then get ready to go back the next. So I think I was at that job for maybe about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You've had such a cool history, and what you said about persistence and sticking with what you're working on, that's a really powerful message because it rings true in whatever you're doing in life, right? If it's what you're doing with your career or your personal relationships or your hobbies or your interests. And, I think I was very interested in art as a kid too. And I have drawings and things that I saved, but I didn't stick with it because I felt like being an artist was a really, really difficult career to actually, quote, make it in and be successful.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the many reasons why people stop drawing. They also maybe find something else that seems like might be a smarter career move, or they just luck into something that turns into a better career, or they're told by everyone, don't do that. You'll never be able to make a living at that.
Right.
And frankly, I would agree with them. I'm just lucky that it worked out the way it did for me. Because I know a lot of people, or I know there are a lot of people out there who, if they had a choice, would be doing their artwork for a living, but it's really tough. And as you get older, if you haven't put in enough time, it's hard to find the time in your day to put in the practice that's needed to get good at anything,
Yeah. And I think a lot of the people that are drawn to magic, or at least the way I found magic was actually through a comic book store. And Lone Star Comics was really big here in Texas where I grew up.
Yeah.
And that's where I discovered magic, was at the comic store. I collected comics and would try to, like you were saying, draw. I would try and draw mainly like recreate comic art that I really liked and was drawn to. And that's where I discovered magic and the whole artistic side of magic. Every card has artwork, has been a big part of the lure of the game, and what I think gives people a lot of like reminiscence about their childhood and that artwork related to it.
Yeah, and I think the artwork, especially early in the game, wasn't necessarily that great, because a lot of us were either new or we had other jobs and couldn't devote as much time to it. But by now, all that nostalgia attaches itself to that artwork, that game mainly, but the artwork's part of it, and gives it even more meaning than there would be otherwise. So
Yeah.
it becomes, even more important than it would have been.
Yeah, and that was a huge part of the reason why, because I was thinking about like, hey, what can we do to do something special to kind of spark interest in this idea of this new Magic format that leverages the old cards and the old expansions. And the Arabian Nights set was a set that came around before I even started playing. I started playing, I think it was the summer of '95, so I missed out on all the original expansions. And but I always liked those cards and was always trading for them. I'd buy the new cards when I was a kid, and I'd trade for the old ones. And really, really loved that, in particular the Arabian Nights set. And so when I was thinking about this whole Four Horsemen concept and tracking back to those original 4 sets, Arabian Nights is first, and so I centered in on that, and I was like, okay, who is the most iconic artist from Arabian Nights? And there's a lot of great artists in that set, and it's very, very hard to actually pick just one. But Ernum Jin was a card that I loved as a kid, and I knew a little bit about you from just reading about you, and I was like, I'm going to reach out to Ken, and we're going to do something with Ken for the custom artwork. So that's really how this whole thing got started, and we're so glad that you've been able to contribute to this.
Sure, I'm happy to.
So when we think about Arabian Nights, you said you were doing all these different jobs. Arabian Nights had been in the works, for maybe a year or so. Richard Garfield developed this expansion on his own, and it was the first expansion to build on the base set. Can you talk a little bit about what you recall about, you mentioned a couple of art directors that you were working with, how you got pulled in, and what was going on in these early days in terms of the art? How did they tell you what they wanted you to paint, or where you needed to go with in terms of direction for the art?
Well, I'll preface that with a statement that goes with almost anything anyone asks me, and that's my memory is terrible. I'll do the best I can. I know that in the beginning, because it was still a small company, there were several things that might have been considered limiting. For example, they still had just your basic scanner like I have here, like 9x12 or whatever, which is why probably 99% of all the original art was maybe about this big, 7x9 or something.
Yeah.
And if I'm correct, I've always said this, and I think I'm right, is that in the beginning, they really, I think because Jesper, as the art director, really wanted to give power to the artists and not over direct them. And he's always been a champion for artists in general. So I think I'm pretty sure that all we really got was a name. I don't even remember if there was really any description. It's certainly not like what happens now. Since they're a huge company, they want to have more control over the final product, as any company would. So artists have to go through a lot of directions and different iterations, like thumbnail sketch, color sketch, etc. But I think we were just given a name. And I get so many people asking me, I heard about this thing about the Remora that you didn't know what it was, or something like that. And as far as I knew at the time, the only word I knew that Remora meant was a fish that, attaches its suckers onto a shark and, flies along with the shark, swims along with the shark. So I did a Remora, and I didn't even really do anything to it like I should have to make it seem magical. It was just a relatively realistic painting of the actual fish. So the artist had a lot of freedom back in the beginning, and that's one reason why that turned out the way it did.
Yeah.
Did they, all this Arabian Nights was like based on that 1001 Arabian Nights. I mean, did you research? I mean, it was like Guardian Beast or I mean, was that something they even gave you like a little history? Like, hey, these are the Arabian Nights stories and stuff like that? Or
I don't remember getting anything like that, but a lot of times knowing it was in something called Arabian Nights and the name of the card, for example, Abu Jafar, that would sort of give you an idea of where to go. And they must have told me that he was a leper. Obviously, I wouldn't have known that unless they would have told me. So maybe there was a tiny bit of direction involved, or at least a little bit more information than just the title. And so I would try to incorporate like some architecture maybe from that part of the world. Stone throwing devils, that's behind Brian there. The background is relatively realistic and close to the architecture of that era. And of course, Abu Jafar has the what the heck is that building?
The library.
Huh?
Is it the library? The library.
No, it's the big palace that the man.
I forget what that's called, but yeah, it's very famous. Okay.
Yeah, Taj Mahal. So that's why I put that behind there. So I think, like I say, little direction, but most of us, I think, sort of figured out the way to go, because just because of the title of the expansion.
Yeah. Well, I've got just a snapshot of the Arabian Nights wiki from Wikipedia. There was some interesting stuff in here that, it was a print run of only 5 million cards, which is really small for that time. It's one of the smallest sets at 92 cards. It has 78 unique cards, 27 commons, 51 uncommons. And, the setting of the 1001 Arabian Nights, in some of the interviews with Richard, he talked about how he felt like that there was almost an infinite amount of stories and ideas that could be pulled from that, and that's why he used it to kind of set the context of what the expansion was. And then you mentioned Ice Age and the Mystic Remora, which was in the Ice Age set. The development of Ice Age was going on, as well as the Mirage set, which came later, while he was working on the Arabian Nights set. And these things came out years later. So, it's interesting to see that there's a lot of development and time and work and effort that goes into the designs of the sets themselves. And then, of course, all the artwork has to get created to match it. Here's a snapshot of some of the printing sheets. There's some guys that did some really interesting research. There's no known Arabian Nights uncut sheets like there are from a lot of the other Magic sets. They've all been either destroyed, or if there are any out there, they're locked away in someone's collection. But a group of guys recreated, based on a bunch of research, to the best of their knowledge, what they thought that the original sheets looked like. And so this is kind of just a snapshot of some of the sheets in their uncut format. So let's talk about the art that you did, Ken. There's several just absolutely iconic cards that almost every old school Magic player knows. And let's talk about those, and let's talk about the art for those that you did. Let's start with.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say about those two, the Kurt Ape, that one you see there obviously is a lot larger. When I did the original, since they were so small, and I knew they were going to be reproduced even smaller, I didn't put a ton of detail in the foliage, for example. It was almost just expressionistic or impressionistic. And so that one that you see was a much larger version than I did. I think at that time I wanted a couple of big paintings for the Las Vegas show at the time, when I think, I can't remember the name of the company now that ran the events for a long time. They had the exclusive. Do you remember their names, Chadster?
Well, I know that like you're talking about like the gaming conventions that used to host them.
Well, just there was a company that did a lot of events. They had an exclusive on the events. This wasn't that long. This is only like about maybe 10, 15 years ago at the most.
Well, I know that the original events were, the original Magic events were at Gen Con, which is like a gaming convention, and had lots to do with role playing and stuff like that. And then now, SCG, Star City Games does a lot of conventions. You work a lot of those events yourself, and you did that one in Dallas here we met up at, which was cool.
Yeah, this was a company that had gotten the contract to do all the events. But anyway, so that's what that was for. There was a Vegas event coming up, which was the biggest one of the year, and I wanted to do some large ones. And so the original photograph I used for reference is from National Geographic, and I actually had to go find that issue again, which was not easy. And it was actually from that year, like 95 or so, or maybe a little earlier. I can't remember. But so this one, I put a ton more detail in, so it's a lot more realistic. And the Guardian Beast is just a big version of the Guardian Beast, so nothing really changed much there.
Yeah.
You can
Quick question: Do you like painting gorillas? Because I see a lot of them, or are you left painting gorillas because Kurt Ape is so popular and that kind of pushes you to do it?
Yeah, option B. It's not that I don't like painting gorillas. It's I wouldn't be doing it if that
was my question. Yeah, like if you had to just do one for yourself on a weekend, you're not going to do another ape somewhere. Okay.
No, I don't have a burning desire to paint apes all my life. No. But yeah, I do a lot of altars that are little repaintings, and then I do these bigger ones and a little bit smaller than these two here that I take to conventions to sell.
And you did the painting class, didn't you, for the Beast of the Bay? That everyone painted a Guardian Beast. That was such a cool idea. I love those guys.
The people that did it really liked it, and they showed their stuff later, and sometimes I still see those things popping up from people.
Yeah, I saw that event. That's a great idea. Really cool stuff. Well, let's get into these kind of 5 iconic artworks and cards. I did the best I could to find the best quality images that look close to the originals. Most of these I got off of your site, Ken. The Stone Throwing Devils. As I was looking closely at it, is this a watercolor, or do you remember what the?
All of them were watercolors back then. Yeah.
That's something that I never even knew. Looking at the original cards, I never knew that there were watercolors, and I remember trying a watercolor class in college, and watercolor was very challenging to work with when you're starting out. And so, can you tell us about why you chose watercolors and you're still doing a lot of watercolor work today, right?
Well, actually, I'm not doing as much now. But for some reason, I think when I first started using watercolor in general, it was because I had been mainly doing black and white work, line work, and watercolor was the best thing to color a black and white piece with, because except for a few colors, it's not opaque, it's transparent. So you can paint over black lines and they'll still be there. And then I just started using more watercolor, and those White Wolf projects I was talking about, all those black and white books, they were all in watercolor. So that's what I knew. And so that's the medium I did these with, not because I thought they should be watercolor or not be watercolor, but at that point, it was really the only medium aside from black and white line work that I really knew.
Got it. Yeah. Well, there's something really magical about watercolor, the softness to it. It's different from acrylics or oils, and it has a certain feeling that the watercolors create.
Yeah, and I think although you can paint with acrylic and oil thin enough to get some of the same feelings and the same type of results, watercolor, I like it, and acrylic ink now that I use a lot, because they're very liquid, obviously, and there are some areas, like in this case, the green wall in front, where you can sort of let the paint do what it's going to do. And it makes the process more interesting. And to me, it makes the finished product more interesting because you can splatter some color on, you can drip some color on, you can let it drip, you can do all these various things and let the paints and the water interact and create some interesting textures and visuals that would be hard or impossible to do if you just planned every little brush stroke.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think of like Drew Tucker being the watercolor guy, but your stuff has a lot better, I don't know, just more detail. It feels like, I don't know.
Well,
I
really love Drew. He was one of the people that stood out to me way back then when I saw various cards. And that may have been because it was watercolor, although I think it was more because his imagery was maybe hazier, less distinct, less detailed. But a lot of times, that's really good because that lets the viewer sort of see what they want to see and make up their own sort of story, if you want, to go along with it, rather than something that's so incredibly finished and detailed and doesn't leave much to the imagination. So yeah, he does really good work, and it's cool that he is getting new work now from them as well. And I was going to say, Chad, I don't know if you knew this, and maybe I should have sent it to you, and maybe I can still send it to you, and you can incorporate it. But I did new versions of a lot of these cards, including Stone Throwing Devils, just for myself, because like most of us artists who did that work back then, that was a long time ago. And we consider ourselves to be a lot better now. So a lot of times we look at that older work and say, oh man, that really is terrible. Because we're looking at through our lens as to what we can do now. But if you want to see those or use them or show them, let me know and I can just send it to you through DM and Facebook. I don't know if you can include stuff in this on the fly, this presentation.
Well, not these are in PowerPoint. This is what I've done here to kind of create the presentation. I actually have I have some of the cards, the repaint new art cards. I'm going to show those once we get past the original art.
Oh, right. I saw that. Yeah.
We did some of those too. The idea that we were thinking was we wanted to give everyone who participated in our tournament something, so that if you played, whether you won or lost, or whether you qualified for the top tier, the finals or whatever, we wanted to give our players something. So we ended up giving out your new art token cards that you printed off and signed for us, and those were our participation prizes in addition to the playmat first prize. So I'll show
I got a funny Drew Tucker story that was just a classic. So he goes to these small old school events and same kind of thing, but like he hangs out before, after. I mean, he's there. So like it was like the night before we show up at the bar and everyone's just getting together, and you've ever seen how everyone like signs a card that's there. And so, like, my buddy gives one, and he's passing around, has Drew Tucker sign it. I'm like, do you know who that is? Because, like, it gets like $2 a signature, man. Like, he just signed it like everybody else and didn't say a word. It was great, but it was just too funny. He's just like, here, sign my card. All right. Wasn't his art, wasn't one of his cards. He just signs it like anyone else. I thought it was great. So somewhere out there is one of these super tatted up with a Drew Tucker signature stuck in there.
Yeah, Drew's a real chill dude.
Yeah, and the next night he went out to the bar with us again, and since Jason's a smoker, I was able to hang out with him a lot because I go out there and they were in the same area. But he was a great guy too. I'm just kind of like, he's like, I'm here for the event, man. I'm here for all of it. He was there and all the stuff, and I don't know if you do all that or not, but it's super cool and such a great guy to hang out with, honestly.
He's really he's there to sign stuff and to do art and stuff like that, but he's also there for a good time.
Just hang out, have a good time. Why not? Living the dream.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about the artist community, like being able to get in touch with Ken or get in touch with Drew, being able to meet you guys at these events. When you're a kid and you see someone's name in a comic book or you see an artist's name on the cards, you just assume that these are famous artists, right? At least I did. I thought that when I was a kid, I thought, wow, look at this Mark Teaton art, or look at this Ken Meyer Jr. art, or look at the Jesper Merfer's art, or whoever else was doing the the artwork, and I just assumed that these were high end successful artists that that I couldn't approach. And now that we're older, and the social media connection is there, it's really cool to be able to reach out and get commissions, have new art created, go to these conferences, and like you said, hang out with the artists. Ken and I did that at SCG Con here in Dallas. A couple of guys came in for that conference, and we took Ken out, had dinner, took him to one of these really nice Tex-Mex restaurants that's kind of famous here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Had a great time, and it's really fun. It's really cool to be able to connect with the individual behind all the artwork.
Yeah, we come down from our penthouses once in a while to associate.
Yeah. So
all
when
the,
it comes,
all the little people.
that's right, us little people. So when it comes to the actual card itself, Ken, do you remember seeing the first versions of the cards with the artwork on them, like with the proofs or things like that? Do you recall getting those first versions?
Well, sort of memory again, but I do know that I didn't really realize that the artist proofs were then, or going to be, as sought after as they became. I mean, I gave a lot of them away, when I was at shows. I wish I would not have, because obviously it'd be great to have a lot of those. But I think, if I remember right, was it Arabian Nights? They did not do artist proofs. There was one set back then that they didn't even do it.
Yeah, it may be Arabian Nights because it was the very first expansion set. But there were the base sets, the alpha, beta, and unlimited sets were out. I think alpha and beta were out in '93, and then Arabian Nights and then unlimited, I think, was the order.
Yeah, I know I had some Curd 8 proofs, but I think it's because it was reprinted later, and that's probably what I had.
Right. Yeah, it was reprinted in the Revive set, which was the fourth printing of the base set.
And it's always, almost whatever medium a person's work is printed in, it's always really great to see the actual product in print form. I mean, nowadays, most magazines have gone away, and it used to be a big deal to get your work printed in Sports Illustrated, Playboy, TV Guide, all that stuff. And that's pretty much gone away, which is really sad, because there were some really amazing artists. Some of them became really well known that did work, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and I guess it started dying out in the late 90s. Now, like, say, for example, I still do White Wolf work, but it's for companies that have taken over the product. There's one called Black Chantry in England. There's one called Onyx Path here in the US. And Onyx Path pretty much does PDF versions. And then if people want a copy of the book, then you get print on demand. So it's not quite the same feeling. And they don't send out like free copies or anything. So you don't get that. I mean, really, artist proofs, definition of it is that as the artist, you're supposed to get approved to approve like the color, etc. But that wasn't really part of the process. It was just given that name for whatever reason. We didn't have any approval after it was printed.
Yeah, I wonder if they actually gave you, if you actually really had an approval process of like, no, I don't like this. It's probably like, too bad, right? It's already done, because that was moving fast.
Yeah, and they wouldn't have been able to do that. So many artists that would have hung up things so badly. So I'm not surprised that it was artist proof in name only.
Well, let's talk about, you mentioned Abu Jafar and the
Taj Mahal.
The Taj Mahal. Yeah. So this is another really cool watercolor art. As kids, we were used to seeing it really small in the tiny artwork frame, but when you see it up close, it's like you said, it's very impressionistic. A lot of these artwork pieces because of the size of the originals. Do you remember any other details about the Abu Jafar card?
No, I wish I had really great stories for you on every single card.
We can
But
make some up for you if you want. We're pretty good at that. We're creative.
yeah, that's actually my mom. She modeled for me. She
Yes.
had a really bad year.
His next girlfriend, I was painting her, and then we broke up, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make you
Why do we
be
break
a
up?
leper.
You
And
kept painting at me, you jerk, and I look terrible. Yeah, that was. I actually like. I think you might have seen, Chad. I did a newer version of this that I like a lot more because it's a lot more atmospheric, and of course it's bigger, a little bit more realistic, but it has a really great mood to it, and it's at night too, which makes a big difference. I mean, this one turned out fine, but that new one I like a lot.
that does. I was over here perusing some of your stuff on your site, man. You got a lot of really cool things.
I've got a lot of stuff, that's for sure. I mean, I've been, drawing and painting since since high school. And I think the very first thing I got printed was a Bruce Lee drawing that a friend of mine he was just on the verge of being a professional comic artist. His name's Brent Anderson. And we would write back and forth a lot. He did Kazar, he did some X-Men stuff. He did Astro City more recently. But I sent him a picture of it or something. He said, "Hey, I can ink this and don't go apeshit, but I think I can get it printed." And so he got it printed in a program book called Baycon in the Bay Area way back 1976 or something, because the drawing itself was in 1975. And I've recently reused it and added some things and did a token with it. But I was heavily into Bruce Lee way back in high school.
As you should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, with all of the art and everything that you've done over the years, we're talking about Magic cards, but you've done a lot of other stuff. You hear of like bands and stuff like that are really successful that are like, man, I don't want to sit here. I'm so tired of playing, the hit every show. Are you ever like, I'm so tired of drawing this damn ape, or I never want to see this four-armed purple thing again?
Yeah, I mean, I could totally understand someone feeling that way, but so far it hasn't happened. I mean, granted, doing the same thing over and over again can get sometimes slightly boring, but at the same time, I don't want to screw up, so I have to, pay close attention to what I'm doing even if I'm painting this thing for the 200th time. So it hasn't really become a chore or anything yet. I certainly didn't think I'd be painting these things again and again and again.
You seem to have a lot of fun
right?
You have a lot of fun with Guardian Beast with all his 6 arms and the different things he's done, and it seems like he's a good subject you can kind of put in different settings. I see him holding things and fighting, and
Yeah, I've done a bunch of different paintings of him. Usually someone will want a commission or something. There's like one, and I've developed this philosophy that he, like the one you see in the card is probably like a teenager, and then a version. And then I've done one where he's probably a couple 100 feet tall. So he's like, maybe the oldest Guardian Beast there is. And I've done various sizes of that particular one. And when I do these paintings like I did for Chad, where it has a lot of my characters together, either that or the Curd Ape usually ends up being the common background behind all the characters. The Guardian Beast is sort of a take on these creatures called Tharks from Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars book, because I was really into Edgar Rice Burroughs and Conan and a lot of heroic fiction back then. So that's probably where I got the idea for the 4 arms. It's not even drawn that well. I don't think it would make sense as a working creature. But I just wanted to make it, cool looking, and menacing looking and everything.
Yeah. We'll come back to Guardian Beast here in just a minute and get into some of those details. But to finish off on Abu Jafar, this was a card that, in terms of the game and the art, like everybody knew this card. If you wanted a way to get rid of a creature, what's crazy about Abu Jafar is he's this tiny little guy, like you said, with leprosy, and he only costs 1 white to put him into play. And he can, if you're attacking with any other creature and he blocks, then that guy's dead. And so it's funny because he's not very powerful in his offensive capability, but he's really quite strong in his defense. And it's a card that all of us kids played with on the sidewalk and back in high school and whatever. So this card's really iconic to a lot of people, and it's really cool to see the artwork up close and really take a look at it, and how you can see so much more detail when you zoom in that you just can't see on the cards.
Yeah, unfortunately, being that those things were so small, you couldn't necessarily get as much detail as you would like. I mean, I say that now when I'm doing these altars where I'm doing tiny images, but still, it's almost painful sometimes to see these cards blown way up, because when you reduce it way down, everything becomes smoother, and little mistakes might not be seen, or just little ragged or sloppy spots wouldn't be seen. But you blow it up, you can see them.
Yeah, it's true. And someone like me doesn't think about that. The from the artist's perspective, you've got 2 different angles looking at this. You got the artist looking at the art and critiquing it and wanting to perfect it, and then you've got the old school Magic player with all of the reminiscence and childhood memories and things. I remember looking at the cards and the fact that they were so small, and having come from kind of a comic book background, I remember the size of the cards almost forcing you to engage your imagination more, because you imagine some story behind the card, and it's funny because something that small still can inspire that kind of imagination.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I know I've heard more than one person say, "Oh, that curd ape scared the crap out of me." And when I look at it, it's just an ape with red eyes,
Yeah.
Big deal. But those are like kids in elementary school or maybe middle school seeing it. So, and they probably haven't seen a gorilla that often, so maybe it is really scary to them.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, speaking of card ape, that's the next card, and this card is recognized as one of the best mana costing cards created at the time, and it was reprinted, like you said, in the revised 3rd edition, which was the 4th printing. And this was also a card that all of us kids had, since it was reprinted. It was readily available, and it was a common, so it was accessible, and it was in every red and green deck. You mentioned earlier that this was from National Geographic, and the background was not very detailed and coming out impressionistic, but even still, like, this is something that inspires a lot of the old schoolers to reflect back on those days. And the impressionistic angle actually looks really cool if you just kind of look at it blown up here.
If you say so. Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, there is enough detail there that you sort of know what's going on. And like you say, when it gets reduced way down, it appears maybe even more detailed than it actually is.
Yeah.
It's just spots of color here and there, and a few lines for trees and limbs and stuff. I mean, some of those shapes at the bottom are just blobs. I mean, when I did that big repainting, and I wanted to get all that foliage correct, then it's a lot different.
Yeah, the contrast in the art that's on the card and what I could find online, I couldn't find a piece of zoomed in art of the Kurt ape that really matched the actual colors and the color contrast.
Yeah, I think even the negative that I had, that I eventually scanned and had for myself, only has so much detail. And of course, when they print the cards, usually that's going to change it somewhat. Maybe the thing colors are pumped up, maybe the contrast is pumped up, whatever the art director or the printer on purpose or even on accident ends up doing.
Yeah.
To changes. I've seen several versions of the color of like Guardian Beast, for example. Some are more blue, some are more purple. So there's always going to be that.
That's actually our. So we do have an event here. I don't know, you probably can't see it, but we're doing the Battle for Ohio. So it's all the local clubs in Ohio go, and we have a tournament once a year, and one of our group can paint pretty well, so he actually did a Kurt ape in a cornfield. It says "Welcome to Ohio" in the background, a little Ohio sign, and we printed 60 of them, so that'll be our promo for this year. And the backs are like a generic back, but we do a different card every year, and so we did the Kurt ape this year, and it's the stuff still comes up. It's kind of crazy. I mean, Eric and I were brewing a deck yesterday about Abu Jafar, which is crazy this many years later, and we're still like, yeah, you need a boo in there with banding, and yeah, so it's still a part of our lives. It's crazy.
Yeah, you could have had Kurt ape eating a ear of corn. That would have been
That'd have been good. That'd have been good. Yeah.
Well, the border colors, on the card itself, the frame also kind of changes the contrast, right? Because this is like a reddish orange, that kind of reddish orange, which is the mountain red color, and the green, it really makes it pop and look quite different. And the other cards too, Abu Jafar has all the blues and green hues in it, and it goes really well with the white. And then, the Stone Throwing Devils have the dark greens and the blacks, and then that tan and the purple. And it looks really cool with the tan of the black and card text. So it's really cool how the artwork itself also interacts with the borders to create new contrasts. And I think that's why that's another reason why Kurt ape is so popular. His eyes are that orange red, similar to the border color.
Yeah, and in this case, red is a complementary color of green, so they both make each other sort of appear more of their color. The other ones aren't complementary colors or anything, and they might stand out because there's a difference in contrast. Like in the Devils, they'll stand out because there's a lot of sky behind them and stuff, but the border of the card is pretty dark, so they're going to pop out a little bit more. But in Kurt ape's case, they're just complementary colors, so I think they make each color look better.
Yeah, well, this is such an iconic card for all of us back in the day. Now let's get to the infamous Urnum Jin. This was the card that I had access to as a kid. It was reprinted in the Chronicles edition, which was it reprinted cards from Arabian Nights and Antiquities and Legends, and it was also a big beefy creature. It's a tough creature for a really low casting cost, and every kid that played Magic eventually ended up playing Urnum Jin. In fact, I was talking with Brian Weissman about that when the year that Arabian Nights came out in '93, how just completely dominating the field Urnum Jin was. It was in every single deck, every single top tier competitive deck. All the tournaments every deck had 4 of these guys, and the artwork is also really, really cool and very iconic and interesting. Can you dive into the Urnum Jin art and what's the inspiration behind it?
Well, obviously it's supposed to be a genie, so there are a few elements that in my feeble mind, say genie. But this is also sort of my comic book background coming into play, because they basically look like superheroes. They're basically like superheroes in in Egyptian
Mhm.
cliche garb. I don't think you're going to see many genies muscled like that. I know that the Juzum Jin, he looks like he could beat up a lot of people, from what I remember.
Yes.
Um, but that's what these are. They're sort of like comic book characters, over the top comic book characters, and the, they were fun to do in the foreground. But then also it was nice to do the blue sky and clouds in the background, especially since it was watercolor and it lent itself well to those elements and the crazy hurricane kind of thing that the one in the back is riding.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is one of those ones where the art doesn't necessarily match the flavor of the card. So the way the card is for whatever reason, on the next turn, the opponent's stuff can get through the woods and they can't stop it. I mean, these guys look like they're everywhere in the woods. I mean, you could never get past these guys in the woods. And so it's like a little background. Everything else is spot on to the story. I always felt this was off for whatever, Again, I'm sure they didn't give you any direction. Just like, hey, we get some green wooded genies or something, right? And
yeah, and I didn't know. I had no clue that there was what the text was going to be in that case. So I don't know if I would have done anything different. But yeah, since I never learned to play, and since back then they didn't really give us any of that stuff, as far as I remember. So
they should be like distracted by like a female genie or something like because next turn they're going to be a little distracted. But these guys look like they are on the game. Yeah.
Yeah, they're actually the redo of this, when I did it, was a female genie.
Is that's the art that you did, Chad, that you put together for this? I've got a set of those.
Well, so that's also part of the whole idea behind the artwork for Horsemen. The original Urnum Jin was actually never as expensive as Juzum Jin. You mentioned Juzum Jin, Ken. That card was, I think at one point it was more pricey than even the Black Lotus for a little while, which has long been the highest priced card. But Urnum Jin was actually a little easier to cast. It only costs 1 green and 3 of any other color, where that Juzum costs 2 black and 2. So Urnum Jin can be added basically to any deck, because it only requires that one little green forest there in the card. I never had an original Arabian Nights Urnum Jin as a kid, and I eventually traded for one when I was in college, and it's all beat up and everything. And so this was, like I said, this card was in all of my early decks. There's an entire theme called Urnum-geddon, where you play the Urnum Jin since they only cost 4, and you play Armageddon, which destroys all the lands. And it's a nice combo that's been around for a long time. That was a deck that I used to play and win some of those little comic book tournaments and stuff like that. I honestly, I can't tell you. I almost can't put my finger on exactly why, but I always loved this card. And maybe it's because of what you said, Ken. Maybe there's so much of the comic book art influence. Some of the comics I was into were things like all the normal stuff, but not so much the major superheroes. Like I had some of the G.I. Joe comics. I was really into this comic called Elf Quest, which was like an independent comic.
Yeah.
By Wendy Penny, and I felt like that Elf Quest had really different art from a lot of the other comics, but also a lot of the other influences too. And there's a whole comic book artwork rabbit hole we could go down, but that combination of having an accessible card, because when they reprinted in Chronicles, it was people would give you this card for free a lot of the times, but you couldn't get the original version, just the reprinted white-bordered version. So something about the art and the playability and the accessibility just made it one of my favorite cards of all time.
It's kind of funny. I mean, I know I must have noticed this before, but when you look at the card, it looks like he's reaching for the little scimitar there.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. And in the artwork that you did, we'll cover this in a minute, but the Urnum Jin's reaching there too. So yeah, this this piece is really cool, and the fact that there's so much green, you know, in the artwork itself, the greens and the blues and the different hues of grays and greens, and the fact that the card is green, it's also, it all works very nicely together.
Yeah, and the yellow makes that one in the foreground pop out pretty good.
Yeah, really cool stuff. Okay, now to the probably the most well-known card, second maybe only to Urnham Jin, is the famous Guardian Beast. You talked a little bit about the four-armed creature. What did you say the inspiration was again?
Well, Edgar Rice Burroughs, who did Tarzan mainly,
Yeah.
but he also did John Carter of Mars and some similar characters. And I was really, really into those books, like in high school. And they had these, the main creatures on Mars were Tharks, and they were these really tall, four-armed creatures, warriors and stuff. So that was probably in the back of my head when I did this. Other than that, like I said, I just wanted to make a sort of a scary character that was really in your face. And obviously you see all the bones below in his lunchtime area. Time
Yeah. Yeah. And we see the watercolor and the impressionistic style based on the size of the original. But even the face of the beast, there's something about it. It's very, like, those eyes are like really they're mesmerizing in a way. Like, it's really cool the way you were able to create a mood and a feeling even on something this small without all the perfect details that you were talking about. It's definitely got something really special about this art and how it feels when you see it.
Yeah, and back then I'm basically self-taught, and I don't know if I even knew what complementary colors were. But in this case, that's what this is: yellow and purple are complementary colors. So the yellow is really going to pop with all that purple.
Yeah.
I went back to school in the early 2000s and learned a lot, and then also could give names to a lot of the processes and things that I've been doing, but I didn't know necessarily what they were called. So back then, it was probably just pure luck that I decided they could have easily just been red, you know. But luckily, I chose yellow, and that made it work.
Yeah. Yeah, and this card itself has never been reprinted in any of the other sets, right? And so you can't get a reprint of the Guardian Beast like you can with the Urnham Jin, with the white bordered Chronicles Urnham Jin, or any of the other Urnham Jin reprints. There's a whole bunch of those. And the Guardian Beast has continued to trickle upwards in price over time, and the originals are still several $100, $300 or $400 and up, and the mint ones are even more than that. So, but this card is also, in terms of playability, it's really powerful. It only costs the 1 black and the 3. It's got the same casting cost as the Urnham Jin, except for it's black, and its power and toughness are a little different, but it can protect all the artifacts that are in play and keep them from being destroyed, which is a really powerful ability.
Good. I'm glad that's true.
Yeah. Well, and that was something that when we were talking about the artwork for Horsemen, that you pointed out a lot of things to me about the Guardian Beast that I never really had thought about before. And that was, that like the Guardian Beast has taken on a life of its own. I grabbed some of the other artworks that you've done on Guardian Beast, including, the playmat in the upper right. And, these feature that giant version of Guardian Beast that you were talking about, doing all this crazy stuff. And he's got like a character life of his own.
Yeah, the fun part over the last like 8 or 10 years that I've done a bunch of variations on is his interaction with the stone throwing devils. And so the devils are just sort of these mischievous little, bad boys, and he's always trying to like fend them off or having snowball fights with them or whatever. So I've done a bunch of pieces along those lines. And then like the one on the lower right was for Beasts of the Bay, and the one on the upper left was for, I think, an Italian tournament. Because that building behind them is some iconic building from wherever it's at. I can't remember.
So Guardian Beast grew up. Did Kurt Ape turn into King Kong? Is that what happened?
Well,
that's a great storyline. I hope that's what happened.
Well, it could be, but since there's nothing really close to those two, they could be almost any size. He could be a regular sized ape and he could be a really small guardian beast because there's nothing right next to him to compare him to. If there was like a chair or a building you would know that's really close to him, then you could say, oh, they're huge or they're not that big. So luckily, it wasn't necessarily planned. They could be the size of a regular ape, or it could be King Kong size. Either way would work.
Yeah. Brian, did you have Guardian Beast or Jason? Did you have this card back in the day when you guys, or any of these other cards when y'all were kids?
No, I mean I actually didn't start playing until like Ice Age. I remember, I knew all this stuff from playing the Charizard game, and always wanted all these things when I was and couldn't afford them. So that's part of my appeal. Is like I'm finally getting to do the stuff I always wanted to. But no, I never had any of those old ones back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Brian, because I'm sorry to interrupt. The thing that works, that I'm lucky, that works for me at these events, especially the old school events, is that the people that play those old school events, the nostalgia and everything, makes it really important to them. And they're usually like guys our age with good jobs and money to spend that they're happy to spend on all these things. So it's just the timing has worked in my favor for people like you, Brian.
Yeah, no, it's it's like I'm sure there was a lull in it for a while. It seemed like it was kind of because honestly, I collected an entire Arabian Nights set before Old School was a thing because I just liked them, and I just always wanted them. And I was buying some of the stuff so cheap. It's just or I got a drop of honey for $10 and stuff like that. And then and I'd show the kids and they thought it was cool or whatever. I was the guy that had the old ones, and all of a sudden one day it became popular. I'm like, I got a full set of Legends too, and so I really got lucky just in that kind of quiet time when it had been forgotten about. I just collected them because they were cool. But unfortunately, I only collected one, and you can't play with unless you have four. So, I wasn't quite that that lucky, but I just had like one of everything. But so no, I never had them. But and Jason, didn't you get a Guardian Beast at like a thrift shop for like $20 or something, or in a binder? What was do you have a Beast story?
Actually, I do. But yeah, I can get to that. But like when I was a kid, like I started playing this game, back in like '94. So I think I was in 7th grade at the time. And so Guardian Beast was like on the radar, like Kurt Ape, Guardian Beast, like all that stuff. It was just, and I just remember me and my friends, we'd just sit there because like, as we've said, there was no story. There was no like theme that pulled all this stuff together. I mean, Arabian Nights was based off some books, but like I was in 7th grade. I never read that stuff. So really all you had was the art. And because the art didn't really tie to anything, it forced you just to try to make sense of it in your 7th grade mind. Like, what this card is doing this, and then here's this art. So like, what the hell is going on here that ties them both together? Because you just thought that, oh, well, this is giant company and they've got these like established artists and they're all doing this. And then you find out it's just a bunch of people in a basement and everybody was just kind of drawing stuff and nobody knew it. So like, I remember when I was a kid looking at Guardian Beast with the artifact, I thought that like the Guardian Beast was like a statue type thing. And that like the lights in the eye, those were like lights inside of him or something. Because like that was the only way that I could like tie him like doing something with artifacts, right? But yeah, it's really interesting. I had all this stuff and just trying to merge the art and the game together, and you just come up with all this crazy shit. I also think it was pretty funny, because like every Magic player that played back in the day has that story where they got rid of their collection or they sold their collection. Maybe everybody except for Chadster. But like for my story was I got in high school and I learned what girls were. And at that point, my Magic cards were at my buddy's house. And so I was just like, oh yeah, I don't care about these cards anymore. You can just have them. So I just gave all my stuff away. I had like everything, but I've since, collected everything back. But I think it's really funny that from the other side of the coin, where Ken was talking about how he gave away his artist proofs and how he wished he wouldn't have done that. So it just goes to show that like how nobody really thought that this was going to become what it was. I'm sure, Ken, you didn't think that, 30 years from when you put together this painting that you were going to be painting it and signing it and doing all this stuff with it. It's really funny. And then I guess my other point is my Guardian Beast story is I got back into Magic and I wanted to get back into old school. And so I was buying some stuff, and there was a local card shop that had they did like this sidewalk sale, and they would like drag all this crap out from their like warehouse and just put it on the sidewalk, and like people could come up and buy it. Well, I got a tip that they were going to be putting out binders of Magic cards. So I get there like 30 minutes before this thing starts, and then there's another guy there that I knew was going to want the Magic cards too. And so like I went up to him and I was like, all right, man, we know we're both going for the Magic cards. So let's just like, instead of like working against each other, let's work with each other, and like we'll split it all up. And he was like, okay, cool. So they open the thing and we walk over to the bin of Magic cards, and there's 4 binders there. And he grabs 3 of the binders, and I only was able to grab one. I grabbed one of the binders and I was like, okay, let's split them up. And he was like, nah, that's okay. And then he walks off, and I was like, what a jerk, dude. So ends up his binders were full of like 4th edition and Homeland shit. And then my binder was full of like all this ridiculous reserve list stuff. And there was a Guardian Beast in there. But the binder had apparently gotten wet at some point. So like mold had like grown over it. So I think I have the worst condition Guardian Beast in the history of mankind. I mean, this thing is terrible, but I still sleeve it up and play with that son of a bitch because it's so awesome.
You should like encase it in resin or something, because that moss might really add to the flavor of the card.
It does. Like I've got it sleeved up, and I'm afraid to take it out of the sleeve because I'm pretty sure that the pressure for me just trying to take it out would just like completely disintegrate the card. So like it is where it is, and I'll play with that thing until the day I die. I think I paid like a nickel for it at the end of the day. But it is one of my most prized cards because I've got that story to go along with it. It is so terrible.
That's a good story.
I have That's similar, I'll try and keep it short because it's not Magic related. It's comic book related. As a kid, my brother and I, especially me, collected all this stuff, and this was like, so we had Marvel stuff from the late '60s, and first, I know my mother threw out my collection because we had left them out too often, and then when I was in college, I had my dorm room, and in the corner of the dorm room, I had all these cardboard boxes of comics, maybe about 5 or 6 pretty big boxes full of comics, and a lot of them were probably worth a fair amount even back then. But I was doing some stupid candle sculpture on top of the boxes, and I left the room for a few minutes, and then I hear everybody rushing around, and they're grabbing fire extinguishers and run into my room, and like they're spraying shit everywhere, and so whatever was in those boxes was just useless after that. Don't do candle sculptures on top of your rare candles.
That's your prized possessions. Yeah.
Let's learn.
Do drugs, but don't do candles on your comics.
Well, so Ken, let's talk about the play mats. So when I first started talking to Ken in 2022 about doing some art for us on the Four Horsemen Old School Magic Players group, I mentioned this particular playmat art that Ken had done back in 2017 for someone else. And I really liked this repaint of the Guardian Beast. And, when I first started talking to Ken, I said, hey, I'm thinking something like this, but I want to do something different because I don't want it to be the same. And we had talked in our first conversation. He had asked me, what's your favorite characters and what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I love them all. Can we do something with all of them? So that was kind of the idea, was doing something like this, but adding in the rest of the Arabian Nights and the other Ken Meyer Jr. characters. Ken, can you talk a little bit about this piece that you did in 2017?
Sure. I mean, yours is a lot better than this one in many ways. This one's kind of cool because it's really dark and moody and everything. But the Jinn, for example, is too small because I was too worried about keeping the proportions correct. And the Jinn is way too dark also. So yours allowed me a chance to do this, but better, and also incorporate the stone throwing devils in there.
Yeah.
So I think in this case, I just used the Guardian Beast scenario background and incorporated the ape in there and added the Jinn up there. So this is pretty good, but yours is a lot better than this one.
Yeah. Well, I actually have this playmat. This was one of the playmats that I got from you when we also did the other playmats, and I wanted one of these since it was kind of the inspiration, and have kept this. But that was kind of the spark for the concept, and what we did from there was, I was talking with Ken about doing a larger piece and doing something sizable. And in order to help kind of fund this, I had participated in a Foglio Kickstarter from some of the Foglio artwork from Magic. And I had the idea that, what if I could do a Kickstarter for Four Horsemen?
Is that where I got this one from?
Yeah,
Kickstarter, right. I think, right?
That's right. You were one of the original backers from the Kickstarter in 2020.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and that's how we connected. And that's how you got kind of learned about Four Horsemen, and then you played in several of our first few tournaments. And this Kickstarter was just kind of a gamble. I never done the Kickstarter before, had no clue. Kickstarter takes like 25% or 30% of the funds. I had no clue they actually did that as part of their fees. And there's a lot of other platforms that I think, could be better for these types of things. But, it was the one that I knew about. And we actually got about $5,500 in pledges. And a big chunk of that went to Kickstarter, but the rest of that I used to try and fund, the artwork itself to compensate Ken for creating this unique custom artwork. And it was a lot of fun to do that and see the community support it and everything. And so, thanks to everyone who did support the Kickstarter, you, Brian, and Ken, for doing it with me. So here's a look at the art. And Ken, just talk us through this.
It's crazy. So this is, like I say, sort of similar to the last one. I mean, the beast is there front and center, and the ape's there to the left. The dark rituals guy's behind him. Abu Jafar's to the right at the base of the tree. Remora is off to the right. There's even some Moxes off to the right. The Jinn is brighter, drawn a lot better, more imposing looking, and a lot more interesting action type pose. And then the goofy devil stealing one of the Moxes in the foreground makes it really work for me. That one was a lot of fun because I could incorporate all these silly devils into it and have them, create like a little story where they're running away or trying to steal all this stuff.
Yeah. And here's a look at a decent scan of the actual watercolor artwork. The the dimensions are a little bit different for the actual play mats, but the artwork itself just turned out amazing. Like I just love it, and I think it's like you said, I didn't really ever think about how that prior version had imperfections in your mind, and it's really cool to think that you got a chance to like do what you really wanted to do in all the ways that you wanted to do it and make it look exactly like you wanted it. And there's so much going on when you really start to look at the scenes, like the devil, he's got the mock sapphire in his hand, and like in the original Urnum Gen art, Urnum's reaching down with his left hand grabbing at the moxes. And in our original conversations, you had told me something about the Guardian Beast, that the Guardian Beast is actually the guardian of the power, the moxes, the lotus, the really powerful cards. And you incorporated that concept into the art here as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think someone else told me that, and so I tried to make that be part of it. Yeah, there's a lot of detail like this. You might miss this little devil hanging upside down in the trees up there.
Yeah.
And there, like, you can see a couple more down underneath the crotch of the Guardian Beast way in the back.
What's he doing? I can see both of his legs. I was really curious what he's up to back there, that little guy.
Oh no, where? What?
He's jumping, I guess. Don't you see both of the one under his crotch there? Yeah.
Yeah, he's just very excited.
He's very happy to be there. Yeah. He's cheering his friend on. You got it. Go.
Yeah.
Well, in the process of doing the Kickstarter, one of the things I did is I showed how the ideas came together. So one of the first things Ken did is he did a mock-up sketch for me. This is the original sketch, and had all the pieces kind of laid out, and Ken, I assume this is something you do for anything that you're planning out like this, right? Where you make sure you're putting some structure to it.
Yeah, and obviously, especially if I'm doing it for someone, then usually you send a sketch first, and make sure they know what's what, so that they can have their input and change anything they need changed. I mean, I have done some things where people just tell me, go ahead, do what you want, kind of stuff. But usually I try and send a sketch first, because also that hopefully makes it less possible that I'll have to do changes later. That someone will say, oh, I didn't want that, and then have to fix it, because that can be a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Did you decide to add in the Mystic Remora in the fountain? Because it's not in the original sketch here, but it certainly helps make the composition work in the final piece.
Correct. Yeah, I just, I figured I should include as many of them as possible, and for some reason I didn't think about that in the sketch, but then I figured it out later.
Yeah. And then, guys, here's a look at how the pieces came together. This is an early snapshot of I guess this is pencil, Ken, is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately I didn't change the contrast like I should have, so a lot of those lines would have been dark and you would have seen more of what's going on.
It comes together really nicely. I tried to line up the pictures here to kind of show the piece coming together. You start with the background and the purples and the blues and the oranges, those complementary colors you were talking about.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily always start with the background like that. It just sort of depends on the piece. Like, it'd be great if I could just do one big sky, but then that would mean I'd have to mask off all the stuff that's in the foreground, and that's a pain in the butt too. It makes for a more continuous blend of colors, which would have been nice. But in this case, it doesn't hurt to have some variety in the shades of the sky and stuff. It was like misty air or whatever. So it worked out fine, and it's relatively simple background. It's mainly supposed to be more or less the Guardian Beast card background, but just expanded.
Yeah, it's really cool. You can see a lot more detail of the jungle, the dark purple woods in the back. And, I always felt like it was like purple moonlight, shining through in the sky. And I really like the watercolor, the effects that the watercolor has and how everything has this kind of softness to it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And then here's a snapshot you sent me as it's starting to come together with some of the more specific details.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have anything to say to that, but yeah, you're correct.
Who owns this final piece when you were all done?
I think Chad does, don't you? You have it, don't you?
Do you have the original?
Yeah, so I own the original, and what Ken and I decided to do is, I wanted to do things like print T-shirts, make these play mats, maybe print cards of with this particular art on it, And so what I ended up doing is I paid Ken an extra fee to basically not only own the original art, but to be able to reproduce it on things, like other playmats or cards or T-shirts, things like that, so that I own the actual intellectual property rights for it. And so I did that so we could kind of use this in different ways. Like I use it, for example, on the YouTube channel as like the background art. I use it in all of our Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. And so I think it was well worth it because it's such a cool piece of art. There's so many things you can do with it, and it allows us to have kind of like this unique thing that's special to the Four Horsemen.
Do you guys like hearing about mistakes that I see, or do you not want to know that kind of stuff?
Love that kind of stuff. Yeah, what do you say?
Yeah, sure.
See, I don't know if you know what a tangent is, but in art, a tangent is when, for example, if like this is a pole, you don't want a building to be like right next to it, almost touching. You want it to sort of overlap to some degree. It gives more depth, and those tangents, when they're like really close, when they're not supposed to be, when like it looked like a wire is this direction, and then like someone's head is this direction, and it looks too much like it's going in the same line, that can sort of like cause some like low-level anxiety that you wouldn't really recognize, but it would not look right, So like right below the bottom hand of the guardian beast, you can see it still has that purple color of the foreground area. But what I should have done is continue the dark area under his crotch past that thumb and continue up towards the fingers. So the area right below the palm was really dark, not a dark purple, but a really dark blue. Because right now it looks too much like the line of his crotch is continuing along the line of the palm of the hand. And it's just something that sometimes, you're working on something, you just don't see it because you're too close. You maybe not see it because maybe you're hurrying or whatever. I can't remember what it was in this case, but that's something that I wish I would have fixed.
Well, you can fix it when you're making me one. That'll be nice.
Huh?
Well, and that's certainly one of the things that, for any of the audience and viewers, I would encourage you to do. I think it's really, number one, it's really cool to see this process. And I had never done a custom commissioned artwork from an artist before, but Ken, it was really great doing this with you. It was fun. The final result, it was fantastic. And, thank you so much for doing this with us. And I would encourage anyone to, if you're interested, contact Ken and, get him to create something unique and special for you. You won't regret it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Are you pretty backed up? I mean, some people I'm anymore. It's like almost don't want to talk to them because they're so behind on things. Or what's your situation these days? If I wanted to do a custom piece or a remake or something like that.
I try to be as prompt as possible. There are some artists that honestly I don't think they have the discipline to get stuff done in a timely fashion, or they could just be really backed up, or a combination of both. But I try and keep up. Like right now, I have like one set of a bunch of ultras somebody wants done, like about 9 cards that just sort of came about recently, and maybe 1 or 2 other cards that I have to do alters on. And then I have some other work totally unrelated that's coming up. But, since I don't have a job at Salvation Army or whatever that's going to take me away from doing artwork, I have all the time that I need to usually get stuff done and get it to someone within like a couple weeks or a month or something. I've heard
Oh wow, okay.
horror stories of other artists that have had commissions for like a year or 2 years, and that to me just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, for Brian, for me, I think Ken and I started working on this in June, and we had it out by the mid to end of July. You know, end to end. And you know, you've got one of the play mats, but for the audience, this is how the final play mat turned out here.
You gotta
Really-
hold it farther so it covers your face, Chad.
There we go. Yeah, it turned out great. The players love it, and you know, we did the stitched edge version, which is really nice. The colors you know, kind of augmented the contrast to make the colors really pop for the mat. And we give these away to our first place prize winners. If you win any of our Four Horsemen Old School Magic tournaments, you get one of these play mats.
I see another mistake now too.
Uh-oh.
Oh man.
Don't beat yourself up, Ken. Nobody else would see these but you.
Yeah,
And
it's kind of funny. We were talking about a similar thing earlier, and I've taught some classes, and I taught some classes in this technique called acrylic pouring, where you pour the canvas, you pour the paint on the canvas, and it's almost always abstract and stuff. And a lot of times, people in the class would be leading toward an expected result, and because of the nature of this, the way this paint is constantly moving and stuff, it wouldn't always have that result, and so they'd feel like they failed. But I would always tell them, you're gonna have your idea of how the process was supposed to turn out and how it maybe didn't turn out. But a viewer only sees the final painting. They're not gonna know any of that stuff. So just shut up, you know, let them enjoy it, and what I should have done.
Well, okay, so let's take a look. We're almost to the end of our time, but these are some of the new artworks that you did for Ernham Jin, Kurt Ape, the Stone Throwing Devils, Abu Jafar, and we had ordered a bunch of these from you. Had a bunch of them signed, and these were the new Ken Meyer Jr. Iconic, you know, Arabian Nights artworks that we gave out. And these Guardian Beasts that you signed for us were really popular. We gave those out for people who won second place, and people were really striving to get, you know, second multiple times so they could complete a set of 4 of those. And that was really fun to see that. And, you know, Ken, all in all, like having the play mat and having the cards, you know, it gave everybody something fun to strive for. And I think it really helped the group get off the ground. And I want to, you know, sincerely thank you for doing this for us. And we really appreciate it. It's been a really fun experience doing this with you.
Yeah, great. I'm glad. I will point out that 3, if you want to go back to the cards, 3 of the 5 cards, or 3 in the middle, were actually the redone versions. And the 2 on the outside, well, the one on the right is from that mat you showed me, but I did a totally reimagined Guardian Beast. And then the one on the far left was done for one of the gaming magazines, like, I don't know, Inquest or whatever, one of those gaming magazines back then.
Yeah.
The actual reimagined version was the female one I was talking about. But the ape, I wanted to look more menacing, have more action, you know. I totally redid the Stone Throwing Devils so they looked like they could actually throw a stone.
Yeah, a little more ripped. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like the original a lot because it's sort of that contrast, and they're just sort of gangly, goofy-looking creatures within a realistic landscape. And then the Abu Jafar is the one I was talking about, where there was a lot more detail, more atmosphere. That one I liked a lot.
Yeah, it's really cool. Well, these were really popular, and you know, we've given out almost all of these as participation prizes to our players, and they've been really popular. I wanted to include a snapshot of your convention work because you mentioned you're going to Denmark, and there's some of your altars here. You know, if you want to do a shout out to everyone to hit you up at your conferences, yeah, these altars are really cool. Everybody loves these. And you know, it's really great that you're able to get out there and be amongst the community doing all this stuff for us.
Yeah, I do a lot of these. I mean, I don't do as many as like say Jeff Lobenstein or Arcade Post. They're nuts. They'll like come back from some foreign country and then go to an event the next day. I don't know how they do it. But I have, let's see, I've got the Denmark one, and then a Minneapolis Star City Games, and this thing called Monster Palooza, which is a totally different thing. And then there's a small one called Zombie Open in Pennsylvania, and then there's one in Spain in a couple months, and then I might be going to one of the Star City Games. I think it's Hartford, Connecticut, maybe. But I try and do at least one a month. But there's a stupid part of me that wants to be able to play tennis as often as possible. And when you go to these events, it takes time away from that. So sometimes I won't. I'll try and tailor it so I can enjoy my time at home.
So is tennis your true love, Ken?
Probably. Probably. But I can't make any money at that. I can't make a living off that. I'd be on the street if I tried to do that.
Tennis keeps you in good shape, though. It's great exercise.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, I usually bring a lot of mats, prints, a lot of tokens. I've got a ton of tokens. On my website, kenmeyerjr.com, there's a link on the main page that takes you to this Store Envy site or page that I have, series of pages. Yeah. That's here, where I sell all this stuff. There's all kinds of stuff there that you can find, including all the mats and tokens and stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to be sure to include all the links here. The Ken Meyer Jr. StoryEnvy.com store. I was looking through that today. There's so much cool stuff on there. Your Instagram, Ken Meyer Jr., and then KenMeyerJr.com, then of course Facebook. And so reach out to Ken if you guys want any custom work done, and you'll be real happy with the final results.
Thank you. I appreciate it. They're usually pretty fun to do. I've done some. I tell people I've done everything from Homer Simpson to Hitler, and I've done Hitler twice. So I've done a lot of stuff.
I was flipping through. These are some of my favorites that I saw just real quick. I mean, them playing poker. This is freaking awesome. I mean, you've got the Mora over here, the painting. I mean, I don't know what you did. This thing is amazing. There's the Abu back there. I guess it's kind of all wrapped up. And
I did a recent sort of similar thing for Sin City, Las Vegas, and it was actually playmat, so it was horizontally. It's not that one that you showed. That was for somebody else, but it's a bunch of characters, playing on a game table, and Richard Garfield is in there with them playing. That one turned out pretty good too. This one's pretty funny.
This one's great, yeah, because the Guardian Beast is the extra hands holding some cards under the table. That's amazing. Again, here's they're walking across the desert, and this I assume it's a playmat based on the
that was a
format, but
for another event, I think overseas or something.
Yeah, you got the Guardian Beast carrying a camel, and then you got Abu Jafar over here, and he's got a little Amora in a jar in the desert. There's Abu fishing. They're throwing rocks, and there's this boy Harambe getting hit by the rocks in the water. These are just great. I mean,
yeah, there's the snowball one.
Yeah, this was amazing, and you can see the look in his the look of fear in his eyes as the giant snowballs coming into the poor little devils.
When I did that, I forgot the tails, which I've done now and then on the stone throwing devils, which is silly. But yeah, I've done several of these, and some of them are a lot. There's one with this huge lobster. I think it was done for the event in Palm Springs.
Okay.
The Risk, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, Risk is down there. Yeah.
That was really crazy because it's like this huge lobster with like sunglasses and smoking marijuana, and there's a like a little stone throwing devil coming around him, offering him a drink, and that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, the snowmen have little skulls.
Yeah.
We're here in Cincinnati, so Harambe is hits home. That was a good one.
Yeah.
This was looks like WinCon. I mean, this seems like the perfect thing if you're doing an event, just to, put some of the funds towards your own custom mat. These are,
that one turned out really good. Yeah.
This one was kind of cool how you kind of put the curd ape there off to the side even. So these were, I don't know, there was a billion of them, but yeah, I don't know. These are great. I mean, some of the stuff I've not seen. Some I have. Just 'cause but you're a busy man. I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff. These years are a lot of the last several. It seems like that have been pretty prolific.
Yeah, I do a lot. I definitely do a lot. I'm happy that I do a lot.
We are too, and it means a lot to us. It's funny. So,
all right, guys. Ken, thanks so much for joining us for the conversation and talking with us about all your art. And thanks again for supporting Four Horsemen Magic. For anybody out there, if you want to check out this unique old school format, it's fourhorsemenmagic.com. And Brian, thanks for having me and Ken on the podcast as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we'll do another part and kind of get maybe more into the format and stuff. But it was great having Ken on here to talk about that. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll inspire a few more nerds to send some money your way and get some cool stuff going.
Come, all you nerds. Hello, nerds. Hello, nerds.
All right. Well, have a great night, everybody. And for the listeners, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I hate all of you. Now you can edit that out. Right?
All right. Good night, Ken. Thanks a lot.
See you guys.
See you, man.